Morpheme, the smallest unit of meaning in a language. Abraham Maslow developed the hierarchy of needs, which he theorized to be the unconscious desires that motivate people. Subordinating conjunction. Join the dependent clause to an independent clause to which it is related. Stereotype. In oversimplified belief that all people from a certain group or with certain characteristics are the same. Voiceless sound. Sounds made without vibrating vocal cords. Howard Gardner, best known for his theory of multiple intelligences. Classroom management. Active management of the physical classroom space, the culture of the classroom, and individual student behavior. Independent or main clause, a clause that can stand alone as its own sentence. One-word stage, stage of language acquisition, characterized by child's use of a single word to convey a full meaning. Verbs, show action or state of being. Classification criteria, used to determine when English learners have achieved the language skills necessary to succeed in English-only classrooms. Humor stage, stage of acculturalization, when students start to come to terms with their circumstances and move toward acceptance of their new culture. SIFE, students with interrupted formal education. Grade equivalent, score found using the average score of students who fall into that grade. Labial consonant sound, sound produced by the top and bottom lip coming together, example the M. Gerund phrase begins with noun form of verb ending in ing plus any modifiers or complements. Connotation, the implied or associative meaning of a word. Helping verb, verb that indicates tense when the action occurred. Woodcock-Munoz Language Survey, an individually administered assessment that measures cognitive aspects of language proficiency in the form vocabulary usage, verbal analogies, and letter-word identification. Audiolingual Method, an oral-based approach to language instruction developed by linguists and behavioral psychologists, teaches the target language through repetition. English Language Proficiency Assessment for the 21st Century. Consortium of states whose assessments are aligned to the English Language Proficiency Standards developed by the Council of Chief State School Officers (CCSSO), which determines the state's college and career-ready standards. Phonetics, study of the production of sounds in speech. Silent way, teaching method based on the idea that language learning should be much like problem-solving and discovery learning. Teachers are as silent as possible during lessons in order to promote the student participation and experimentation and to concentrate on learning over teaching. Age equivalent score, found using the average score of students within an age group. Dependent or subordinate clause, clause that cannot stand alone as its own sentence. Inferential item, a piece of information that requires the test taker to read between the lines in order to determine what the author is implying. Communicative competence, the ability to speak a language both appropriately in a social context as well as correctly in terms of rules and structure. Two-word stage, stage of language acquisition. Children begin to learn words and use word combination. Early stage of literacy development, characterized by the learner's use of multiple strategies to protect and understand words. Lead and support, teaching strategy that relies on one instruction and assuming a lead teaching role with the other providing support as needed. Intermediate fluency, fourth stage of second language acquisition. Learners have acquired vocabulary of about 6,000 words, are able to speak in more complex sentences and correct many of their own error. Free morpheme, a morpheme that can stand on its own. Literal item, information that refers directly back to the content of the reading material where the answer is defined word by word. Semicolon, punctuation used to join two closely related sentences that could each stand on their own. Monitor hypothesis, knowledge that is gained through formal learning that can be used to monitor speech but is not useful in spontaneous speech. Validity, indicates how well an assessment measures and what it is intended to measure. A test is not considered valid if it is not reliable. Scaffold. The support that allows the child to work above their independent level and is gradually removed as a learner gains mastery. Positive behavioral support. Social learning approach that assumes all persistent behavior choices are logical, so a persistent misbehavior must serve some purpose. Cognitive academic language proficiency (CALP), language needed for academic work and study. Natural order hypothesis. One of the 5 hypotheses of the monitor model posits that language is attained in the foreseeable pattern by all learners. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. People understand the world through language and language shapes how we experience the world. Classic conditioning. Learning a response to stimuli or the environment. Assimilation. When a speech sound changes due to the influence of nearby sounds. Passive voice. Sentence construction in which the subject of the sentence is receiving the action of the main verb. Language policy. The set of actions of government takes to regulate what languages are spoken in a given country. Basic interpersonal communication skills (BICS). Social skills students use in everyday life when socializing on the playground, in the cafeteria, and outside of school. Norm referenced. A test that measures students in comparison with other students of the same age. Integrative Services. A system where all agencies are working in cooperation and the clients and their families have access to a streamlined and connected range of needed assistance. Lau v. Nichols. This 1974 Supreme Court ruled that the San Francisco Unified School District had denied Chinese-speaking students rights to equal educational opportunities. The ruling stated that schools receiving federal funds must provide programs to address the language needs of non-English speaking students. Total Physical Response (TPR). Instructional method that provides students, particularly beginning language learners, with the opportunity to acquire language skills by listening to and following spoken commands. Bound morpheme. A morpheme that must be attached to a word to have meaning. Sociolinguistic. Study of language and its relation to society and culture. Individualist culture. Characterized by the value placed on the individual and individual accomplishments rather than on the family or group to which the individual belongs. Sheltered instruction. Provide English language learners with access to appropriate grade-level content while supporting their need for ongoing language instruction. Collectivist culture. Prioritizes the needs and outcomes of groups such as a greater community, society, or nation. Keys v. School District No. 1 Denver, Colorado. The 1973 Supreme Court decision ruled in favor of the plaintiff, giving Latino students the same rights ascribed to desegregation as had only previously been given to African American students. Standards-based education. Education based on a set of learning outcomes clearly set by the district and state that all students are expected to achieve. Infinitive phrase. Verbal phrase that may act as a noun, an adjective, or an adverb. Extrinsic motivation. Motivation driven by external rewards. English language proficiency standards help identify the target language development skills an English learner is expected to meet in the context of instruction that is appropriately scaffolded for optimal learning. Discourse competence. The ability to effectively arrange smaller units of language like phrases and sentences and a cohesive works like letters, speeches, conversations, and articles. Linguistics. Scientific study of language. Clause. Contains both a subject and a predicate. Relative pronoun. A pronoun that begins at dependent clause. For example, I live in Texas, which is the largest state. ESL paraprofessional, and education professional whose role is to assist ESL teachers and L today. Utterances. Speech acts of one or more words that contain a single idea and are surrounded by both sides by silence. Conference. A meeting between teacher and student in which learning is orally assessed and evaluated. Indirect teaching. Student-centered instruction in which the teacher facilitates opportunities for students to construct their own learning. Linguistic relativism. The belief that language only partially influences human thought and action. WIDA. Consortium of states that promotes research, standards, and professional development to support ELs and academics and language learning. Thematic unit. Integrating curricula across content areas under general theme. Antecedent. The noun a pronoun replaces. Cultural norms. The rules and standards a group uses to determine what are appropriate or inappropriate expected and accepted behaviors. Phrase. A group of words that communicate a partial idea and lacks either a subject or predicate. Close procedure. An assignment in which students find the correct terms omitted in a sentence or passage. Differentiation. Providing curriculum for students based on their individual needs including learning styles and level. Induction. Process by which learners figure out the rules of language as they acquire speaking and listening skills, learning through a combined process of imitation and trial and error. Listening guides. Statements or questions or provide instructional focus when listening to a lecture or other form of auditory instruction. Language experience approach LE. Uses learners' prior knowledge and experiences to generate specific lessons that are designed to enhance the learning of each individual student. Cooperative learning. When the teacher places a student into small groups and give them a task to complete together. Discovery learning. When students perform experiments or research information to comprehend new concept. Diagnostic assessment, given before learning experience to measure the student's baseline knowledge. Cognates, visually similar words. Schema, framework of understanding and a child's brain. Underextension, when a child definition of a word is too narrow. Strategic competence, the ability to recognize and repair breakdowns in communication through strategic planning and/or redirecting. Guided practice, practicing a new concept with scaffolded support from the teacher. Period, punctuation used and imperative and declarative sentences. Appositive phrase, a particular type of noun phrase that renames the word or group of words that precedes. Cultural awareness, development of sensitivity to an understanding of other cultures and the ways culture influences individuals. Fanboys, an acronym for the coordinating conjunction for and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Preposition, set up relationships in time or space within a sentence. English language learner, student whose native language is not English. Monochronic cultures, culture in which time is seen as linear with one event happening at a time. Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974, federal law that prohibits schools from sharing identifiable information about students. Formative assessment, informal assessments that are used throughout the learning experiences to help teachers make instructional decisions and to provide feedback to students. Self-actualization, the final state in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The individual has realized their potential and seeks fulfillment and growth. Inflectional morphemes, found morphemes that do not greatly alter a word's meaning or part of speech. Behaviorist theory suggests that repeated exposure to stimuli can create learning. The more frequently behaviorist performance, the more quickly it will become habit. World Englishes, localized varieties of English, particularly those that have developed in territories under the influence of the United Kingdom or the United States. Cultural bias occurs when a test offends or penalizes a test taker due to items related to socioeconomic status, gender, or ethnicity. Gerund, noun that is formed by adding ing to a verb. Fluency stage, stage of literacy development characterized by the ability to maintain meaning throughout longer and more complex text. Push-in ESOL programs, One ESOL teacher traveled to contact classroom providing additional support and services to language learner intended to maximize the time English language learners spend in general education content classroom. Edward Thorndike, researcher whose work initially led to operant conditioning. Thorndike's learning laws include the law of effect, the law of readiness, and the law of exercise. Epenthesis, inserting an additional sound in the middle of a word. Conjunction, short word that connects words, phrases, or sentences. Lawrence Kohlberg, identify the stages of moral development. Emergent literacy stage of literacy development, the competencies that are developed early childhood and preschool. Cognitive process, acquisition of new knowledge and skills and the ability to apply new learning to new situations and draw conclusions from it. Pre-operational stage, second stage of Piaget's cognitive developmental theory. 2 to 7 years of age, a child's intelligence is progressively demonstrated through his or her use of symbols. Hostility stage of acculturation. Students are getting comfortable with getting around and meeting basic needs, but they may feel at odds with the new culture and may be homesick. Improper noun, general person, place, thing, or idea. Concrete operational stage, third stage of Piaget's cognitive developmental theory. 7 to 11 years of age, children demonstrate increased intelligence through logical and organized method of thinking. Interrogative pronoun, a pronoun that begins a question and requests information about people, places, things, ideas, location, time, means, and purposes. Input hypothesis. One of the 5 hypotheses of the Monitor model states that comprehensible input is necessary for students who are in the process of acquiring a new language. Pronoun takes the place of a noun in order to minimize repetition. Voicing. Voiceless consonant changes to a voiced consonant because of nearby sounds. Advanced fluency. Fifth stage of second language acquisition. Learners have achieved cognitive language proficiency in their learned language. They demonstrate near-native ability and use complex, multi-phrase and multi-clause sentences to convey their ideas. Standardized test. A test administered to all students in a consistent way and then graded in the same way so that score comparisons may be accurately made. Verb phrase. Composed of the main verb along with its helping verbs. Connected speech. When speakers simplify sounds and run words together. Speech therapist. Certified professional who diagnoses and treats communication disorders. Language Assessment Scales (LAS), designed to measure the oral proficiency and reading and writing abilities of K-12 students. Measure content such as vocabulary, listening, comprehension, and storytelling are available in both English and Spanish. Pre-production, first stage of second language acquisition. Learners may refrain from speaking but will listen and they copy words down and respond to visual cues. Endmark. Punctuation used at the end of a sentence. Every student who succeeds Act ESSA. Replace the No Child Left Behind Act. De-emphasize standardized testing for English language learners. Language modeling. Providing accurate examples of speech and language for language learners. Register. Variety of language used in a particular setting. Communicative Approach. A combination of several methods of language instruction based on the notion that successful language acquisition comes from the need to communicate real meaning. Intrinsic motivation. One's personal drive to succeed or learn. American with Disabilities Act (ADA) prohibits discrimination based on disability in schools. This includes activities that take place both on and off campus, including athletics and extracurricular activities. Complex sentence has only one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. Sensory motor stage. First stage of Piaget's cognitive development theory. Birth to 2 years of age. Child's knowledge is based upon physical interactions and experiences. Remediation. The additional support provided to regular education students to bridge gaps in learning. Positive transfer, when students find similarities between their native language and English and use those similarities to aid in their learning. Compound complex sentence has two or more independent clauses and one or more dependent clause. Determiner, the articles a and the. Morpheme acquisition order, the pattern in which morphemes are learned as people acquire language. Poverty of stimulus, assertion by Noam Chomsky that children are not born with enough exposure to their native languages to explain their ability to understand phonemes, and therefore this exposure cannot account for the sum of their learned language. Connectionism holds that language comprehension and production abilities develop through continual engagement with language. Adverb, word that describes or modifies a verb, adjective, and other adverbs. Grapheme, symbol used to represent phonemes. Lesson planning, the alignment of standards, assessments, and learning materials to create a learning trajectory for a course of instruction. Early production stage. Second stage of second language acquisition. Learners achieve 1,000-word receptive and active vocabulary and can produce single-word and 2 to 3-word phrases. Home language survey. Short form that is sent home as part of a school enrollment packet used by school district to determine the primary language is spoken in students' homes. Transfer. Applying Bollock of a first language to another can be both positive and negative. Verbal prompting, using words and beginning phonemes to assist students. Place of articulation, the point where two speech organs come together to make a sound. Summative assessment, formal or informal assessments that evaluate student achievement after learning takes place. Reinforcement, the process of strengthening behavior through awards or consequences. Interdisciplinary Unit, a unit of study in which content from all subject areas is integrated. Authentic materials, materials intended for use by native language speakers and not second language learners. Productive language skills, abilities related to produce incomprehensible language from within, such as in writing and speaking tasks. Home stage, stage of acculturation. Students are comfortable within their new culture and embrace it as home. Receptive language skills, abilities related to understanding language that is received from an external source, such as oral directions and commentary, visuals, sounds, and written work. Advert clause, a dependent clause that modifies a verb, adjective, or adverb in the main or independent clause of a sentence. Interjection, word that expresses emotion, such as oh and wow. Derivational morpheme, morpheme that creates a word that has a new meaning or part of speech. Whole language approach, the idea that learners should start at the top and work their way down, meaning that language should be considered and its complete form prior to being broken down into smaller pieces. Transitive verb, verb that requires a direct object. Voiced sound, sound made by vibrating the vocal cords. Standard conventions of written English, the grammar, usage, and mechanics rules that govern the proper production of the English language, particularly in written form. Assertive discipline, a classroom management technique in which the teacher takes clear control over the classroom and its dynamics. Individualized Education Plan (IEP), an annual meeting for each special education student that outlines the student's learning goals and identifies the accommodations and modifications that will be offered to a student. No Child Left Behind of 2001, Title III of NCLB required that LEP students be placed in a language instruction education program, and it defined what constitutes a language program. Interlanguage, the learner's present understanding of the language he or she is learning, a rule-based system that blends aspects of the learner's first language with those of the second. Discrete language skills, aspects of language that are governed by rules such as phonics, grammar, and syntax. Transformational grammar, revolutionize the study of language by turning the focus away from semiotics and meaning toward the system of rules that dictate proper sentence construction. Task-based instruction (TBI), Lessons are designed around the completion of tasks that are either assigned by instructors or selected by students. Tasks are usually defined as activities that are carried out by learners using their language knowledge and resources. Constructivism, when students construct their own knowledge through learning experiences. False cognates, words that appear similar but are different in meaning. Syntax, how words are arranged into phrases and sentences. Correlative conjunction, whether or either or, neither nor, both and, not only but also, functions like a coordinating conjunction. Task analysis, the teacher takes a larger complex goal and breaks it down into smaller, concrete components that lead to the ultimate goal. Annual Measurable Achievement Objectives (AMO). Divergent questions, open-ended questions designed to assess the student's ability to analyze, evaluate, and create. Convergent questions, questions that have a clear, correct answer. Code switching, mixing words from a first language in with the language being learned. Phonemic awareness, the knowledge that words are made of specific sounds. Model, measure of developing English language, series of assessments that educators can use to identify and place English learners as well as to monitor their progress toward instructional. Mechanics, the rules of print that do not exist in spoken language, including spelling, capitalization, punctuation, and proper paragraphing. Pidgin, grammatically simplified mode of communicating that uses element of two or more languages. Common Core Standards, the predominant set of standards used across most states for math and English language arts. Active listening, improves listening skills by structuring how the person listens in response to the person who is talking. Authentic language, reading materials from books, newspaper, the internet, and other real-life sources. Equal Educational Opportunities Act of 1974 (EOA) states that no state shall deny the access to equal education by failing to take appropriate action to overcome language barriers that impede equal participation by students in its educational programs. Aspiration, sound produced with a burst of air out of the mouth, for example the letter H. Universal grammar, Noam Chomsky theory that children are born with the innate ability to understand the human voice and to distinguish between different parts of language. Linguistic Set, a group of words and rules that compose an individual's working knowledge of language. Affix, a bound morpheme that can be added to a root word to change its meaning, grammatical function, tense, case, or gender. Subject, what a sentence is about, includes the noun that is performing the main action of the sentence and the noun's modifiers. Language bias occurs when a test that was originally developed for use in one language is translated to and administered in another language. Curriculum-based measures determine student progress and performance based on specific lessons presented in the unit. Team teaching, content area and ESL teachers take an equal role in teaching all the students in a content classroom. B.F. Skinner expanded on operant conditioning but focused on responding to environment in lieu of responding to stimuli. Pre-speech stage of language acquisition. Infants learn to pay attention to speech, inflection, and rhythm before they begin to speak. Speech emergence, third stage of second language acquisition. Learners are able to chunk simple words and phrases into sentences that may or may not be grammatically correct. Accommodation, provide a student access to the same curriculum as their grade-level peers, but information is presented in a different way. Polychronic culture that views time more holistically and is able to conceive of many things happening at once. Exclamation point, for emphasis, for emotion. Content-based language instruction, the use of subject matter material in and the basis for practicing communication skills. Acculturation, process of adapting to a new culture. Noun, names a person, place, thing, or idea. Idiom, a group of words whose meaning cannot be deduced from meanings of the individual words in the group. Reciprocal determinism. The theory by Alberto Bandura that behavior is determined by a combination of cognitive factors, the environment, and stimuli. Non-count noun. Names things that cannot be counted. Demonstrative pronouns. Point out or draw attention to something or someone. For example, this is my apartment. Parallel teaching. Content area and ESL teachers teach the respective groups at the same time. They may, at times, switch groups in this scenario. Proper noun. The name of a specific person, place, or thing. Basic inventory of natural language (BINL), used to measure oral language proficiency and one of 32 different languages by asking students to describe a set of images. Participial phrase. Verbal phrase that acts as an adjective. Simple sentence. Has only one independent clause and no dependent clauses. Adjective. Word that describes or modifies a noun or pronoun. Integrated framework. Plan for achieving goals in all subject areas by combining content across disciplines. Acquisition learning hypothesis. One of the 5 hypotheses of the monitor model, learning the rules of language will not allow users to produce output. Only authentic acquisition will allow students to use their new language effectively. Morphology. The study of word forms and their component parts. Equal access. Provides procedural safeguards to ensure that all students receive the same benefits of public education regardless of disabilities. Silent period. Time at the beginning of second language acquisition when students are either unwilling or unable to communicate in their new language. Erik Erikson, a researcher who developed the theory of psychosocial development that focuses on reconciling individual needs with the needs of society through stages. Active voice. A sentence construction in which the subject of the sentence performs the main action of the sentence. Prepositional phrase. A phrase that begins with a preposition ends with an object of the preposition. Semantics. The study of meaning in language. Regional and social dialects. Language variations that are common to the people in a certain region or social group. Indefinite pronoun refers to a non-specific thing or things. For example, someone has to know the answer. Albert Bandura, Canadian psychologist who developed the social learning theory. Attribution theory. Internal attribution is assumed when other people make mistakes or are victims, as individuals tend to see others as predictable stereotype. When an individual makes a mistake, he or she tends to view that cause as external. Idea proficiency tests. Designed to measure the oral proficiency in reading and writing abilities of K-12 students. Measure content such as vocabulary, syntax, and reading for understanding and are available in both English and Spanish. John Dewey, pragmatic philosopher who viewed learning as a series of scientific inquiry and experimentation. He advocated real-world experiences and volunteerism. Honeymoon stage. Stage of acculturation. Students are delighted about the novelty and the new culture around. Direct method. The principle that second languages should be acquired in much the same way as first languages, also called the natural method. Station teaching. Students move through various stations set up in the classroom and teachers work with them in small group. Semi-authentic materials. Materials based on original materials that have been adapted to fit the lesson objectives and the needs of the students. Castaneda v. Picard. Vowel reduction, shortening or diminishing of a vowel sound. Compound sentence, has 2 or more independent clauses and no dependent clauses. Stem root. A base word, often a free morpheme, to which other morphemes can be added. Consonant cluster, a group of 2 or more consonants. Phonic skills-based approach focuses on transferring students' literacy skills independently, and this approach, specific skills in readings, writing, and speaking are targeted and practiced each day. Parentheses, punctuation marks that enclose insignificant information. Socratic method. teaching technique in which a leader prompts discussion solely by asking questions and allowing the class to share and then respond to and build upon one another's idea. Diphthong, sound made when one vowel sound blends into another vowel sound in one syllable. Cognitive dissonance theory, uneasiness that is felt when an individual has conflicting thought. Pragmatics, the study of the meaning of language in context. Conjugation, the process of changing the spelling of a verb and/or adding helping verbs. Count noun, nouns that can be put into plural form. Migrant Education Program MEP, a provision of the NCLB that provided for the expansion and regulation of education programs for migrant students. Learning contract, agreement negotiated between a student and teacher with possible input from other school personnel or parents, designed for the improvement of an objective. Zone of proximal development, the space between what a child can do independently and the learning goal. Predicate, describes what the subject is doing or being. It contains the verbs and any modifiers or objects that occupy it them. Monitor model, a set of 5 hypotheses developed by researcher Stephen Kroshen. According to Kroshen, there is no fundamental difference in the way that humans acquire first and subsequent languages. Verbal phrase, a phrase that begins with a word that would normally act as a verb but instead filling another role within the sentence. Jean Piaget, Swiss psychologist who was the first to study cognition in children, identified stages of development and contributed to schematic learn. Self-assessment, a method by which students monitor their own progress towards learning goals. Sociolinguistic competence, using language in a socially appropriate way and understanding register. Jerome Bruner, constructivist theorist who contributed the 3 modes of representation to the field of cognitive development. Phonology, study of the sounds and patterns of particular languages. Nasalization, sound produced when air comes through the nose. Comprehensible input, language that is just slightly above the student's current grasp, new information that students are able to understand because it is introduced alongside information they already know. Denotation. Words dictionary definition. Early multi-word stage, stage of language acquisition. Children begin using elements of grammar and repeating longer sentences, so they are still unable to create their own. Used to end questions. Colons, used to let a reader know a list or explanation is upcoming in a sentence. Communicative language teaching focuses on students' abilities to communicate through interactions in the target language. And CLT instruction, students use authentic text and realistic scenarios to practice skills they would use outside the classroom. Pull-out program. Certified ESOL teachers take small groups of students from their content area classrooms for limited portions of the school day to receive specialized instruction focusing on intensive vocabulary and grammar objectives. Overextend, when a child's definition of a word is too broad. Transcription, way to visually represent sounds. Language acquisition, subconscious process in which language is internalized without deliberate intent. Short-term memory, information that enters the conscious memory but is not stored for recall at a later time. Transitional stage, stage of literacy development, characterized by a steady reading pace and an understanding of multiple strategies that can be used to decode difficult texts. One-on-one, a type of instruction which a teacher works with one individual student on a concept. Fossilization. The point in second language acquisition in where the learner's growth freezes in place and further linguistic development becomes highly unlikely. Usage. The generally accepted ways in which words and phrases are used in different contexts. Linguistic determinism. The belief that all human thought and action is controlled by language. Formal operational stage. final stage of Piaget's cognitive developmental theory. 11 years of age and older, adolescents and this stage demonstrate intelligence through logical use of symbols and their relationship to abstract concepts. Later multi-word stage, stage of language acquisition. Children average 4 to 6 words per sentence and can learn as many as 20 words per day. Interference. When language learners incorrectly apply the rules of their native language to the language they are learning. Access. Accessing comprehension and communication in English state-to-state. Large-scale progress monitoring assessment. Motor disabilities, characterized by loss of movement, may be caused by injury or disease. Benjamin Bloom contributed to the taxonomy of educational objectives and the theory of mastery learning. Operant conditioning provides reward or punishment as a motivation for desired performance. Bilingual syntax measure BSMI and 2 measure oral proficiency in English and/or Spanish and must be administered individually. Student scores are based on the grammatical structures of their oral responses. Bias, favoring something over another, often unreasonably. Grammar, set of rules that apply to properly structured sentences. Linguistic competence, knowledge of the linguistic components of a language such as morphology, syntax, and semantics. Grammar translation method. Instructors help students recognize similarities between their native and learned languages by teaching and students' native languages and concentrating on grammatical rules of a target language. Noun phrase consists of a noun and its modifiers. Intransitive verb, verb that does not require a direct object. Direct object, noun that receives the action of the verb. Crow, a pidgin language that becomes nativized, meaning people begin speaking it as a first language. Affective filter hypothesis. One of the 5 hypotheses of the monitor model, stressors such as low self-esteem, poor motivation, and anxiety may all inhibit language acquisition. Language learning come through direct instruction. Students are conscious of the fact that they are learning and are able to speak about their new knowledge and explain where it came from. Self-motivation, the drive from within that inspires a person to work towards something. Learning theories describe how genetics, development, environment, motivation, and emotions affect students' ability to acquire and apply knowledge. Elision, when sounds are omitted from the pronunciation of a word, usually because the omission makes the word easier to use in everyday speech. Think, pair, share, when students reflect on a question individually and then turn to other students nearby to share and discuss their responses. Stress, emphasis placed on syllables or words. International Phonetic Alphabet, notation used to represent the phonemes used in spoken language. Babbling stage, stage of language acquisition. Infants usually play by controlling the pitch and volume of their vocalizations and learn to produce sounds based on friction.